Good morning, students. Today I'm going to start the messages and methods. So in the last class, I was explaining the messages and methods, right? So what is a method? What a message I explained? I explained about the interclass and interclass overloading. Once again, we'll see the brief about messages, and afterwards we'll see what is a method, and we'll see the examples. So in the last class, as I already explained that before knowing the message and all, we are treating the messages as the machines, where these machines are carrying out the operations, and how they carry out the operations based on the request given by the other objects. So whenever the objects are sending the messages, and these messages should be understandable by that particular object. Alright, so before object sends the message, it should be necessary that the object must understand that message. And so depending on the understandability of a message, and this understandability can be done at the runtime or at the compile time. In the case of interpreted language, that understandability means message understandability is done at the runtime, whereas in the compile languages it is done at the compile time. These things I already explained in the last class, right? Sites are visible, right? All of you hearing? Yes. Clarity is there on voice, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay. Then I'll continue. Mm. So this is about the message. We'll see the definition of a method. The name of an object behavior is called as a message. And this thing I also explained, right? There are two types of overloading operators. One is intraclass and interclass. Means in a overloaded functions or operators, we have interclass overloading and interclass overloading. And my object-oriented language supports this operation, right? Overloaded functions or operators. We'll see what is intraclass and interclass overloading. Also, interclass overloading means in the system, the two functions can have the same name as long as their argument types differ. See here we have the alarm clock, set time is a function, and it is having the integer arguments, but in the second one, it is having the string argument. But see the function name. Function name is same, set time. So we are using the same function name, but the arguments differ, right? And this type of overloading is called as intra-class overloading. Understood? So this is called as intra-class overloading because we have the function name same in both the one, but the arguments differs. So in the first one, it is integer arguments. Second one, it is the string argument. So intra-class overloading says that the two functions in the system can have the same name as long as their argument types differ. Understood? And what is interclass overloading? So in the interclass overloading, the functions can have the same name. Okay, and they can also have the same arguments type, but these function names are attached to two different classes. See here, one is the alarm clock and other one is the watch. So we can use the same function name in two different classes, even though the argument type is also same. So, but here the functions are attached to two different classes, hence it is called as the interclass overloading. But in the first one, it is called as intra-class, means within the class. Overloading occurs within the class. Here, overloading between the classes. So in the within the class, we can use the same function name, but argument differs. In the second one, even the function name and argument types are same, but these functions are attached to two different classes, and hence it is said to be interclass overloading. Understood the difference between intra-class and inter-class overloading, what a message is and how the objects interact together with the help of the message. Then we'll see what the message consisting of. See here, if this is the message consisting of the function name, arguments type, and also the return type and the class to which it is attached. See here. So it consisting of the function name, argument types, and return type, and also the class name to which it is attached. So here in this class, it is alarm clock, and the function name is the set time, and the arguments type is integer. In the second case, it is a string, right? And it is also consisting of the return type, whether it is a void or some other one. Okay, so here it also consisting of the class to which it is attached. So here it is an alarm clock, but here the class name is watch. So hence the message consisting of what? Function name, arguments type, return type, and the class name to which it is attached. So this is about the in some languages and our system, additional information may be presented, such as the type of exceptions thrown from the messages. So here in this message, we are consisting of only this type, right? So function name, arguments type, and the class to which it is attached. But along with that, the some other languages or the system may also consisting of the additional information, such as types of exceptions thrown from the message, as well as the related concurrency information. Concurrency information may be whether it says whether the message is a synchronous type or asynchronous type. Now we understood what the message consisting of. Normally the message consisting of function type, function name, arguments type, return type, and also the class name to which it is attached. Along with that, some of the language may support the inclusion of additional information, such as the type of exceptions. Okay, so this says the whether the message is a synchronous or asynchronous type. So this is about what the message consisting of. Then when the messages are constructed, or when we are using the messages for the communication between the object, but here the implementers must know how the message is implemented. Suppose if we consider the message is setting the time or setting the alarm clock, here the implementers of the class must know how that particular message is implemented. Understood? So here the implementers must know how the message is implemented, and the code that implements the message is called a method. Now let us consider that if this is the message. So suppose if we are setting the alarm clock. So if that is the message, setting the alarm clock is a message, then the implementers must know how that message is implemented. And the code that is used to implement that setting the alarm is called as a method. Understood what a method is and what the message is you see the difference. The behavior of the object is called as a message, but the code that is used to implement that message is called as a method. Understood the difference between a message and a method? Any doubt what a message is and what a method is? Yes, Sudeep, my voice is clear, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, now tell me the what a message is and what a method is.
Method is an implementation part of a message.
ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಜೋರಾಗಿ ಹೇಳಿ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ನನಗೆ. Yes.
Method is an implementation part of a message.
Very good. Yes.
And whereas message is an any function name or argument.
That we can say it is a behavior of the object. Behavior of the object is called as a message, and implementing of that message is called as a method. Understood? Clear now? The difference, what a message is and what a method is. And the list of messages to which an object responds is called its protocol. May suppose let us consider a message. He is setting the alarm clock. That is the message. So when that message is sent, then how the object responds to that message is called as its protocol. Now understood what the protocol is? The list of messages to which the object can respond is called its protocol. So suppose for example, if the object is sending the messages setting the alarm clock, when that message is sent to another object, then so suppose let us consider that object 1 is sending the message setting the alarm clock. to object 2, and object 2 once receives that message, it responds to that particular message, and that response is called as the protocol. Now is it clear what a message, method and protocol is? So here we can have the different messages in a class. And these are the what we can say general messages which are based on the type of object of the class. Along with that, the object-oriented system supports two special messages. One is called as the constructor, other one is called as the destructor. Understood? These are the two special messages that are supported by the object-oriented paradigm or object-oriented approach. One is called as the constructor of the class and other one is the destructor of the class. So when we are using the constructor of the class message and when the object uses the destructor, we'll see what is a constructor of the class. The constructor of the class is an operation that users of a class call this in order to construct the object of the class. Means whenever the user wants to construct the objects, then the user uses this operation constructor and construct the objects. Okay, understood? Clear? So whenever the users of a class want to construct the object, he calls the constructor of the class operation and construct the objects. Clear? So constructor of the class operation is used by the users of a class whenever they want to construct the new object. Understood? So like that, a class can have many number of constructors and each taking a different set of initialization parameters. Understood? So here a class can have n number of constructors and each constructor is different one and each constructor may take a different set of initialization parameters. Now let us consider one example. We want to construct a alarm class. Alarm clock is an object, right? Alarm clock is an object that we want to construct. So we'll use the constructor operation and we'll construct the class, right? So for that we have to pass the parameters or we have to pass the arguments. So here initially for the alarm clock we are considering or we are considering 5 arguments. So each argument specify the hour, minutes, alarm hours, alarm minutes and alarm status. Understood? So here we have the 5 integer arguments. Each one represents the hour means current hour, current minute, and the alarm hour, alarm minutes, and alarm status. Alarm status indicates whether it is on or off. Alarm state is equal to on or alarm state is equal to off. Okay, so but it is a integer argument. Then how we can represent that in the form of integer argument, right? How we can pass the values for that? Because we are declaring it as an integer arguments. Right, then what will be the value for alarm status?
On or off?
On or off, okay. But here we are specifying it as an integer value. Then can we say
binary
yes?
0 or 1?
Yes, yeah, binary 0 and 1 we have to give. Because why? Because we defined it as an integer value. If it is a string, then we can set it as on or off. Clear now? Clear, Pranati? Yeah. If it is an integer, then we are specifying the hour minutes in terms of integer, right? And alarm hours and alarm minutes are also integer, and we are setting the alarm status as also integer value. 0 indicates alarm is off, and 1 indicates its alarm is on. Now, is it clear? And that is one type of defining the values for the constructors or when the object is constructed. Clear? We are defining the arguments. And other way is instead of 5 integer arguments, we can go for 3 arguments. Okay, 2 are the string arguments and 1 is the integer argument. For example, see here for the hours, minutes, and alarm minutes, we are combining this. Means hours and minutes, we are combining it into one string argument. Alarm hours, alarm minutes, we'll combine it into another string argument, and we'll keep the alarm status as integer argument. Here, then how that can be given? So since we are defining it in the form of a string, then each string would be of the form hour colon minutes. So this gives the first combination of hours and minutes, and second one is for the alarm hours and alarm minutes. How that can be defined? Alarm hour colon alarm minutes. So that we are declaring as an integer, string, right? So for that purpose, we're using this. And alarm status, either it may be string argument or the integer. If it is a string, then we have to use the value on or off. If it is an integer, then we have to set the value or pass the value as 0 and 1. Understood? Clear now? Yes? So here we are discussing about the constructor of a class, right? The constructor, we can have many number of constructors in a class, and each taking different set of initialization parameters. Like I explained, to construct the alarm clock, either we can consider 5 integer arguments, or we can consider 3 parameters with the 2 strings and 1 is a integer argument. Clear now? Okay. So here in a system we are having the class, and each class can have a number of constructors. Okay. So some classes may have a dozen or more constructor functions. So this is about a constructor. Now we understood what a constructor is and when the constructor is used, or when the constructor operation is called by the user. Whenever the user wants to create the object of that particular class, then constructor operation is called. Clear now? Right? Right. Next we'll move on to the destructor. So what is the destructor? Destructor is an operation that cleans up an object prior to removal from the system. Suppose let us consider the example here. By using the constructor, we have created the alarm clocks, right? So we have created an object alarm clock, right? Once that operation is completed, then I want to delete the alarm clock. Then how can I delete the alarm clock? By calling the destructor operation. Is it clear? Then my voice is clear or not?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So whenever the user wants to delete the object, he calls the destructor operation and deletes the created object. So it is the operation that cleans up an object prior to its removal from the system. But here most of the object oriented languages will have only one destructor per class, but we can have n number of constructors for the class, but we have only one destructor per class, since any decisions that need to be made at a runtime can be stored as part of the object state. And for the destructor, there is no need to pass the additional arguments into the method. But here in the constructor, we are passing the arguments, but for the destructor, no need of it. Okay, so no need to pass the additional arguments for the destructor function. Understood what a constructor is and what a destructor is? Here, just it's a theory, no examples given or no program is given. Just here you're studying the fundamental basic concepts of object-oriented approach. That's all. Right? Clear? Any doubt in the message, method, then constructor, destructor? Right? If not, then we'll move on to the heuristics of messages and methods. First one is the heuristics 2.1 that we discussed in the last class, right? Related to objects and classes. Which one is the heuristic 2.1? Yes?
All data must be secure.
All data must be hidden within the class, right? That means we have to make the data which is private and it should not be public. If you made it public, what happens? Manageability or maintenance of that particular function or program becomes difficult, right? Every data we cannot declare it as a public, so we need to hide the data within its class. That is the heuristic one. And second one is heuristic 2.2. what it says, users of a class must be dependent on its public interface, but a class should not be dependent on its users. You please remember this heuristic. Means users of a class must be dependent on its public interface, but the reverse should not be. Right? Means only the users must depend on the public interface, but the class should not be dependent on its users. And the main rationale behind this heuristic is the reusability, right? See one example here they are given. From the beginning of this chapter, we are considering the example of a alarm clock, right? And this alarm clock may be used by different users. They may keep that alarm in their bedroom or in the hall, kitchen, somewhere else, wherever they want, right? And here the person is depending on the alarm clock. Clear? Here the person is depending on the alarm clock, and the alarm clock should not be dependent on the person. Clear this example? Here we are considering the example of a alarm clock. This alarm clock used by a person, and the person can keep that alarm clock at different places in a house. You can keep it in the bedroom, or you can keep it in the hall or kitchen, etc. Right? And here the person should be dependent on the public interface such as clock, but the alarm clock should not be dependent on the person. But what happens if the alarm clock itself depends on the person? Is it possible? It should not be. Why? What happens if the alarm clock depends on its user? So if the alarm clock were dependent on its user or dependent on its person, then it could not be used to build a time block safe without attaching the person to the safe. Means if it is particular to a person, then we cannot reuse that time. We cannot reuse that alarm clock, right? In a program, we cannot reuse that alarm clock. Why? Because that is defined or created only for that particular person. Let us consider for person 1. So here in the heuristic says that the public interface should not be dependent on its users. So if it is depending on users, what happens? It cannot be reusable, or we cannot reuse it, because that alarm clock is created or developed only for that particular person. If that person is attached to the safe stage, then only we can means we could not be used to build a time block safe without attaching the person to the safe, right? Because these dependencies are undesirable. Following all of you, what I'm telling is, here I'm taking the example of alarm clock, and the user of that alarm clock should be depends on the alarm clock, but the alarm clock should not be depend on user. Okay, if that is the case, then we can reuse the alarm clock. But if the alarm clock is depending on the person, then it could not be used to build a time block safe without attaching that person to a safe. And these dependencies are undesirable, because we want to able to lift the alarm clock out of its domain and deposit into another domain with no user dependencies. If no user dependencies are there, then we can make use of the alarm clock at different domains. Then it leads to the reusability of the alarm clock. If the dependencies are there, means if the alarm clock is depending on the person, then we cannot build it at different domains. The problem arises. Hence, the users of a class must be dependent on its public interface, but a class should not be dependent on its user. And if you consider the example of an alarm clock, then the user should dependent on the alarm clock, but alarm clock should not be dependent on the user. So if it depends on the user, what happens? We cannot achieve the reusability. Means we cannot make use of the alarm clock at different domains, because that alarm clock is designed only for that particular person. Understood? So hence the alarm clock can be viewed just as a little machine having no knowledge of its users. Okay, so if you consider the alarm clock, and that can be viewed simply as the machine, and it doesn't have any idea about its users, and it simply performs the functions or the operations or the behaviors defined in its public interface for whoever sends its message. Understood? Heuristic 2.2.
Yes, ma'am.
The example is given. See here, it's a person and alarm clock. If the alarm clock is designed for a particular person, then we cannot reuse it. But since if no person is defined, or if the alarm clock is not given to any particular person, then we can use it. Then reusability can be achieved. Clear? So here a time clock safe can be built only when the alarm is not attached to any person. Okay, if it is attached to the any particular person, then first we have to say what we have to do. We have to attach a person to the safe, then only we can develop the time block safe. Understood? So hence it is better that the public interfaces of a class should not be depend on the users, right? It should be general one, so that we can achieve the reusability through that heuristic. Understood? Any doubt in this? Next, we'll move on to the heuristics 2.3. Heuristic 2.3 says that minimize the number of messages in the protocol of a class. Means keep the number of messages as minimum as possible. If not, the problem arises. Right. So here the problem with large public interfaces is that you can never find what you are looking for. And so since the object-oriented approach supports the reusability, and whenever the developers are developing some functions, then they thought of reusing it in different domains and different programs, and they simply keep that. And like that, the developers go on developing or creating number of messages, or we can say the number of functions, by keeping in mind that that can be reused in different parts of the program. But as the number of messages increases, then the size also increases, and whenever we are looking into the reusability of that particular message, then then searching that particular message is also a difficult one, or it is a time consuming work, and hence we need to keep the number of messages as minimum as possible, right? But because if we are having the more number of messages or more number of public interfaces, then it is very difficult to find for what we are looking for. So, yes. So for what we are looking for, because this is the serious problem with the reusability, and by keeping the interface minimal, or by keeping the number of messages in a minimum manner, we make the system easier to understand and the components easier to reuse. Understand? Clear? So heuristic 2.3 says that we need to keep the number of messages in a minimum value in the protocol of a class. This is about heuristic 2.3. Next, we'll move on to heuristic 2.4. So what it says, implement a minimal public interface that all classes understand. For example, operations such as copy, equality testing, pretty printing, parsing from an ASCII description, etc. So once again, this relates to the keeping minimum number of public interfaces that the class understands. Clear? So somewhat 2.3 and 2.4 are interrelated. So 2.3 says that we have to keep the number of messages minimum, and 2.4 says that we have to keep minimal public interface that all classes understand. So suppose if the classes that a developer designs and implements are to be reused by other developers in other applications, it is often useful to provide a common minimal public interface. And I'll give the example in this one right here. It's not there, right? Okay. This minimal public interface consists of functionality that can be reasonably expected from each and every class. And this interface serves as the foundation for learning about the behavior of a class in a reusable software base. So 2.3 and so 2.4 are somewhat interrelated, right? Where we are keeping the number of messages minimum, and here we are keeping the public interfaces in a minimum form, in a minimal form. Why? Because when the developers uses or designs and implements the classes that are reused in other applications, then it is useful to provide a minimal public interface. If not, then once again the problem arises, and it is very difficult to identify the in particular information. And the minimal public interface consists of functionality that can be reasonably expected from each and every class, and this interface serves as the foundation for learning about the behaviors of the classes in a reusable software base. And next one is heuristic 2.5. It says that do not put the implementation details into the public interface of a class. Just like heuristic 2.1, we are hiding the implementation details. Here also, we're concentrating on putting the implementation details in a private manner rather than in a public manner. So heuristic 2.5 says that do not put implementation details such as common code, private functions into the public interface of a class. And this heuristic is designed to reduce the complexity of the class interface for its users. And what is the basic idea here? The users of a class do not want to see members of the public interface which they are not supposed to use. These items belongs to the private section of the class. Here one example is given. So here we have the code where it consisting of the class. We are having the class X, and let us consider that this class is a linked list class, and it consisting of the private section as well as the public section. And in the public section, we have the two functions F1 and F2, and F1 is for inserting and F2 for removing. Okay, and here F to be the operation for finding the location in the linked list for an insertion or a removal. See here only F1 and F2, insert and remove, and these two functions can be used by other linked list classes, and hence these two are made public. But one thing that we have made private is for code Y, that is this code Y is whatever we are defining in that, it should be made private, because that can belongs to only that particular linked list class. Clear? Right? And this F1 and F2 are the common functions. These two are used for inserting or removing of the elements from the linked list, and these two can be made public because these two are required by other linked list classes also. So like that, whenever the codes are written, we need to be very careful which function to be made public and which functions to be made private. So that is here. Here, a common code private function is created when two methods of a class has a sequence of code in common. It is usually convenient to encapsulate this common code in its own method, and this method is not a new operation. It is simply an implementation details of two operations of the class. And so whatever the implementation details are there for a particular method, and these implementation details should be placed in the private manner, and the functions which can be used by different classes can be keep it in a public place. See here, in the code Y is an implementation detail, and that belongs only to the class X, where class X, let us consider that class X is the linked list X, and the linked list implementation details is there in code Y, and that should be in private section. But whatever the functions we can perform on that linked list can be keep it as public one. Clear now? So implementation details should be a private one, whereas the functions that we can use, that can be made it as a public one. So do not put the implementation details such as the common code private functions into the public interface of a class. If you made it public, then the problem arises, and the users are not interested in how those implementations are done. They are only interested in how the particular interface can be used. Clear? So once again, if you consider the alarm clock example, here the users are only interested in seeing the current time and then setting the alarm clock by using that alarm clock, right? Only they are interested in performing the operations or the functions on that particular public interface, but how actually the implementation is done, they are not interested. Hence we need to keep the implementation details as a private one rather than making it public. So here that example is given. Here F1, F2 we are keeping these two as the public, but the implementation details we are keeping it as the private one. So this is about heuristic 2. Yes, it is 2.5. The next one is the heuristic 2.6, and this says that do not clutter the public interface of a class with items that users of that class are not able to use, are not interested in using. So just like here, the whatever the thing we are studied in heuristic 2.5, it is just like that, right? We are keeping the implementation details in a private manner, and here once again the heuristic says that the public interface of a class with the items that should not be cluttered with the other classes because the users are not interested in using it. And this heuristic is related to the previous one in that any common code functions placed in the public interface are only cluttering that interface, since users of the class do not want to call such functions. And these are not the new operations of the class. Clear? See here, this heuristic, if you consider the same example here, see here F1 and F2 we keep it public, and the implementation details we are keeping it as private. And there are the new operations of the class because some of the languages such as C++ allows for the erroneous inclusion of other types of functions in the public interface of a class, so that we need to avoid. For example, if you consider the keeping the constructor, so C++ allows keeping the constructor of an abstract class in the public interface, and it is legal in C++. But even though the users of that class will receive a syntax error if she attempts to use such a constructor. Okay, so C++ allows to keep the constructor in a public interface even though the syntax error arises. But that problem is but we need to avoid such situations. And yes, so this is the 2.6 heuristic, and the more general heuristic 2.6 is included to preclude these problems. So we have to avoid these problems. One is we need to avoid keeping the the implementation details of a class in the public, and second one is we do not clutter the public interface of a class with the items that the users are not able to use. It means we should not keep these in the public, or we should not declare it in the public interface. This one, and implementation details, as well as we have to implement a minimal public interface that all classes understand, and we have to minimize the number of messages. So these are the heuristic 2.2. 2.2 says that class must be depends on its public interface, but the reverse should not be, right? That is the heuristic 2.2. And 2.3 says that keep the number of messages minimal in a protocol of the class. And third one indicates that it is implementing a minimal public interface that the classes understand, and do not put the implementation details in the public interface of a class, because that is not required for the users. And these heuristics, the heuristic 2.6 is included to preclude all the above problems. So this says that do not clutter the public interface of a class with items that users of the class are not able to use, or not interested in using it. So this is about the messages and methods and the heuristics related to messages and methods. So in the next class, you are going to study about class coupling and cohesion. There you have to study about what is class coupling, what is cohesion, and what are the heuristics related to the class coupling and cohesion. That we'll see it in the next class. Tomorrow my class is there at 10:45, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'll engage the class at 10:45. Any doubt in today's class? Yes.
No, ma'am.
ಮಾತಾಡ್ಬೇಕು. Okay.